was very interested in just working with kids. I volunteered at camps and sports camps and served with some kids who had special needs in the church and loved babysitting, nannying, kind of your classic way just to get to hang out with kids growing up and just enjoy time with them and their creative minds and just being able to connect with them. And so I initially started to think, I took both a psychology and anatomy and physiology class in high school, which I felt like helped really expose me to my enjoyment of kind of development and how the brain works, on top of my medical intrigue of just how the body works and the various medical diagnoses aside from that. So initially I thought, hey, I would love to go into nursing. Sounds like it could kind of combine, you know, the interpersonal skills that I enjoy, the connection opportunity, as well as the medical side of things. And I was guided towards working at a medical camp my summer after freshman year in college. And that is where I first learned about what a child life specialist is. And because they would come out with kids with the different populations and help with the psychosocial needs, coping, normalization, and just the opportunity for these medical needs, whether it's kidney failure or spina bifida or oncology populations. They come out, they have their doctors, they have their nurses and their medical support they needed, whether it was dialysis or treatment, things like that, but they always had a child life specialist there too. And so that's what first guided me to learning what a child life specialist was. That's how I learned about the field of child life. So learned about child life freshman year of college that summer and went back to my school and was like, man, this is what I want to do. And everyone was like, great, we've never heard about that. We have no clue what you're talking about. We definitely have no academic program structured to what you need to do. So I learned a lot immediately, researched a lot through at the time, the Child Life Council, now the Association of Child Life Professionals website, emailed a lot, asked a lot of questions. And luckily for me, the exposure that I had at that camp setting, I was surrounded by other people who were pursuing similar fields. And so I was able to connect with child life specialists or students who were wanting to become child life specialists who are years beyond me. And so I was able to also use them as a guiding tool. Coursework was a big thing at that time. You know, okay, I'm in my second year of college. I need to start really focusing my classes. Should have mentioned my education at that time was with a major in psychology. Okay. And so I was focusing on psychology classes, lifespan development with a minor in sociology. So I was also taking lifespan, kind of social studies, and aging and death was one of the sociology classes I took. And all of it was just really fascinating to me, which I got really lucky that I found a field that aligned with that, because I've been taking courses that were similar, infant and childhood development, different things. And so I first had to kind of figure out the academic setting and kind of had to do it on my own of which courses worked out, and worked closely with my guidance counselor to make sure I was able to achieve the correct coursework that I needed. I continued to go back for summers to work at that summer camp because they were closely connected with hospitals in the area too. And so it was great exposure for me, not only of the populations in child life, but of I didn't do it for networking, but it helped me build really some close relationships with some of the hospitals. So summer after my junior year is when I completed my clinical practicum at Vanderbilt Children's in Nashville. And so there I was able to do a rotation with outpatient diabetes and inpatient cardiac or cardiology, which, as you all know, is a practicum is pretty solely observatory. And so I just watched a lot and learned a lot and felt that there was a huge gain for me personally in getting to complete a practicum. And I had the flexibility in my time frame and my coursework to pursue that, which not everyone has based on when they learn about child life. But for me, I was able to pursue that in my undergrad career, and it was really impactful. I just felt like my years of education made sense to be able to apply it and see it in the clinical setting. So after I completed that, I completed my last year of undergrad with a degree in psychology and a focus in child development. And I went on to complete my clinical internship at Cook Children's in Fort Worth. And there I did inpatient hematology oncology and outpatient day surgery, and then time in the inpatient pediatric ICU. So those are my 3-week clinical rotations there, and it's great diverse exposure to short-term to long-term chronic illnesses, acute issues, inpatient, outpatient, all the range. So I really, and even just it touched on bereavement, on acute crisis and trauma and bereavement, and supportive siblings through that too. So that was kind of my journey. And then soon after my clinical internship, I was hired on at Cook Children's. Took my certification exam after I'd been hired on a few months in, when the first opportunity existed. Took my certification exam to become a certified child life specialist and work at Cook Children's for a handful of years, initially as PRN and weekends, which accrued to 40 hours a week, but had me all over. And I think that was really formative to my first years. It was really hard because no day was the same of the population I even worked with or unit. But it really pushed me out of my comfort zone to be a flexible child life specialist, to be a capable child life specialist where I was able to do trial and error and seek guidance from other people and really grow in confidence in my skills, and very diverse skills. You know, I ran from an IV start to bereavement to trauma to treatment to a medication taking to coping skills, and that was my day. You know, so I think it really stretched me, but it was formative to my years as a child life specialist. So. It's really hard, so I want to validate that. It can be challenging to figure out kind of just the hoops you have to jump through. And so I think one piece of advice would be to continue to seek guidance. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Do your own research before you ask questions, so you bring some knowledge to the table and don't show up empty-handed, because you can also answer a lot of your own questions, but there are definitely some that need guidance, and not to be afraid. I found that when I was the most confused during my undergrad about what I needed or if this counted for that, and knowing that would be a barrier to my completion of it, knowing that if I just kind of guessed and winged it, you know, I could not have completed the mandatory requirements, or I could have. And so I reached out to the council, and they were always very receptive, prompt, and helpful in their response. And so I think it'd be, you know, to reach out for guidance, whether it's from another child life specialist or this organization, or someone within the council, to reach out. I think the other thing too that I'd also recommend is to never underestimate the opportunity that one invests in exposure to kids, whether it's normalized settings or acute hospitalized settings. But I think if there's one area that I've seen be the hardest to either play catch up on, or that has been sometimes demonstrative of someone's investment in the field, it's been people who do or don't take the time to invest hours, which can sometimes be burdensome, but there's a reason for it. It's to be able to know the baseline of a typically developing 7-year-old versus one who's acute in the hospital, and different things like that. So I think that can be undervalued sometimes by students. I mean, I think people who are in the field can see the value, and then especially as you go through the application cycles, I think that there's a lot of criteria that can look at that as, you know, how much time was invested in pursuing these opportunities. So that's kind of from a student perspective, but also just from a future aspiring professional. I think it's vital to be open-minded, flexible, and emotionally understanding of others. I think that's the biggest thing it's taught me, is it exposes you to people in all walks of life, in all sorts of acute situations, and no one will ever respond like you do or cope like you do, but your ability and the honor of the opportunity to come alongside a family in that acute situation, or in that what may seem like not a big deal, but is a really big deal to them. That may not be a big deal to you, but is a big deal to them, and your ability to validate that and say, and not dismiss it, basically, can go of just such great lengths as a professional. And then it ends up coming out in how you work with the team and the physician, how you work with other staff, how you present yourself and carry yourself as a professional, even of your ability to be emotionally sensitive towards other people's needs and emotions, even if they're different than your own. But I think that's a skill set that's really hard to teach, but speaks volumes non-verbally in one's professional capabilities. was in pediatrics for about 3 or 4 years, and also did some inpatient neuro and things. And then I switched to the program I'm at now, which is in Dallas, serving well children of critically ill or traumatically injured adults. Wow. So we work within an adult hospital. There is no pediatric portion of our hospital here. And we work with the palliative care team. And so the palliative care team is a team that exists to support families holistically. So their physical suffering, their spiritual suffering, their social suffering. And then we were brought on board because the head director realized, that kids are part of that suffering too, not only in how it impacts them, but then in how the patient and their family cope with their illness when they feel that they're supported in regards to their kids. It can be their greatest concern sometimes when they have complex illnesses or traumatic injuries. So an average day in my life, as you kind of asked, means every morning we get to huddle with the palliative care team, go through all the patients on our list. They'll talk about their medical needs, their social needs, their psychosocial needs, their biggest concerns. Sometimes a lot of them, they're all complex illnesses. At times, there can be a large portion too that are end-of-life situations. And so there can be a lot of distress about, existential distress about end of life and children. And so that is really helpful where we can work collaboratively with the staff as they seek to support these families, as we support the families, as they seek to support their kids and cope with their prognosis. And so we huddle every morning, and then based on whatever patient needs we have, I go out and meet families. So typically I meet the patient if they're able to engage with me. We work in lots of ICUs, all the way from cancer to trauma to heart failure to neuro, from stroke or other things, to transplants and things like that. So I'll go usually meet the patient or the caregiver of the child and talk about their biggest concerns, talk about what the kids have been told about their person's illness, how they're coping, behaviors that sometimes one can see as kids may not be able to say, hey, I feel stressed, but it shows in behavior changes. And so we're able to navigate that with families. And I actually just talked to a family who was like, they have been doing that, but initially they're like, they're fine, they're doing great. Right. Like, yes, that's how she's been responding. And so being able to help them just kind of open their eyes to their child's needs and be an advocate for that child and empower the parent of, well, what do I do now that I see that need? How do I have this conversation to tell them about this? How do I support them emotionally because they have this fear? Things like that. And then we're also able to work with the kids directly. Our first and foremost, we always meet the parents and the caregivers because they are ultimately, my goal would be to empower them where they would say, hey, I got this. That would be my goal. Yeah. That they would have the ability and the skill set and the tools that we can provide them to support their kids. But if not, which under a lot of stress, so we still oftentimes meet with kids just to help with that continued processing, whether it's the emotions of what they're coping with, whether it's sharing new information that the parents have asked for us to share, whether it's updating them or preparing them for something to come, helping with emotion expression, coping techniques, fears, worries, misconceptions. So we have an activity space where we're able to do that here and provide that continued support to the family and the kids as they kind of navigate really stressful situations with their loved one. And we say loved one because it could be their grandparent, it could be their aunt who they're really close with, it could be their adult sibling who the child's under 18 and trying to process through whatever is going on with their adult sibling. So we're still able to use diagnosis, education, explanation, medical play, normalized play, coping techniques, all these things that are skill sets you develop through your training and that you utilize in pediatrics that just looks a little different in this setting because kids are going through stress and it's medically related, but it's not their own illness.